Hey there, it's Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to do my second Read It Backwards video where we will be reading Eclipse by Stephenie Meyer. This is the third book in the Twilight Saga and I'll be reading it second because I'm doing Read It Backwards here. So if you don't know what Read It Backwards is, I advise you to click on the link up there or in the description box down below so that you can hear what I am doing here exactly. And as well as that, when I mention this series in my videos, I will also be leaving a link where you can donate to the tribe that is featured in this series, because they are misrepresented in this series, and I would rather that we acknowledge that it's problematic representation and we donate it to them rather than anything else. I will be donating every time I mention the Twilight Saga in my videos, and I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Also, you've been warned, this video contains
spoilers.
I've made a tabbing system like I did in my previous video. Jasper mentions being green. Jasper gets his own tab because he's the best Cullen and the best character in this whole series. Pink for being anything that's romantic and memorable that I would like to actually remember, but I don't remember any scenes in this in particular that actually make me want to remember this. Yellow, it's going to be any love triangle shenanigans. In my head, this is the love triangle book of all love triangles. Like, this puts every other love triangle to shame, and that is the thing that I remember most about this book, so I'm looking forward to tapping a lot of love triangle scenes. And then I've got another color which is orange, and I've got nothing to tab with orange. I think I'm just going to start reading and maybe I'll see a pattern or remember something that happens as I go along that I want to mark in orange. So first of all, I want to mention that I have no idea what is going on. I'm aware that Stephenie Meyer does this thing where she starts the book, she finishes the book, plotline finishes, but then she has one or two scenes before we kind of really finish up the book. So for example, in Twilight, the plotline finishes, but there's that moment where Edward takes her to the prom. And I feel like New Moon probably had some of those scenes because Jacob is mad at Bella, and I have no idea why Jacob is mad at Bella. And in the beginning, Charlie is mad at Edward, and I was so confused, like, why is Charlie so mad at Edward again? Until I remembered that Edward did this whole thing and Bella just went off on a bender to Italy and went and did some stuff and didn't tell Charlie. So no wonder Charlie is mad at Edward. He is rightfully allowed to be. I've also noticed that I'm a little bit more impatient all the time that they're talking about Bella becoming a vampire, because I literally just read the book where she becomes a vampire. So all the time that they're like, oh, you're never going to become a vampire, and she's like, yes I am. I'm like, we already know it, which I guess you always know when you reread, but I think because of the fact that I literally just read it before reading this book, I'm a bit more exhausted by it. Then Bella's talking about the fact that Edward wants her to become her fiance and she's saying no, and I was just like, what? Edward's already proposed and suggested the idea of marriage? I thought that happens somewhere in the book. But then my memory kicked in and I realised that I think Edward suggests this in the first book. In my mind, I've got this line like, marry me, Bella, and her first response is just like, no. And I think that happens in the first book, so the fact that Bella holds out all the way until like the last book, I think that is quite showing how she has some backbone to her in some situations. We've got some mentions of Bella saying that the afternoon is the only time that she's away from Edward and that Bella feels restless, and that just grated on me a little bit. Come on, Bella, be your own person, be independent. And I understand why Charlie's kind of bargaining. She cannot be grounded anymore if she spends more time with other people. I really like that. Again, that's another example of Charlie just being a really good parent and understanding before Bella does that she's not supposed to just dedicate her whole life to Edward. She's supposed to have friends. And speaking of friends, I forgot that she has friends, because in the last book in the series she totally forgets her friends, forgets that they exist, and just spends all of her time with the Cullens and her new family, and just doesn't mention Angela, Ben, Mike, anybody else. So the fact that they're being mentioned again in this book, I'm like, whoa, Bella has friends, and what happens to them in the last book? Nobody cares. Speaking of which, she talks a bit about Renee in this one and her mother, and that was something I forgot to mention in my Breaking Dawn video, is the fact that Bella in her new life decides that she's going to include Charlie and completely forgets about this close bond that she has with Renee. After the wedding scene, Renee is barely mentioned, Renee is barely thought of, and that seems so unrealistic because Bella has such a close relationship with her mother. So I feel like the fact that her friends and her mum get forgotten completely in the last book definitely shows a problem. Oh, and this book mentions Wuthering Heights. I have a problem with this, because I read Wuthering Heights when I was a teenager simply because it is mentioned so much in this book. I absolutely detested and hated Wuthering Heights with every fibre of my body. I think that's one of the books that I've hated the most since I've been reading, and I'm a bit tired of the fact that Stephenie Meyer always chooses like one particular book and then drives home the similarities. At one point Bella describes Edward and she mentions the marble span of his forehead looking gorgeous, and I couldn't help rolling my eyes. That was a little bit ridiculous. And I do have to give it to Stephenie Meyer. I just realised in this one that Edward does still use old turns of phrase and speaks in quite traditional or like posh English, not the way that you would speak naturally. And because her writing style can be so bad in some situations where she uses like adverbs and adjectives again and again and again, and it just gets a bit repetitive, I forget that sometimes she does do little details really well, such as always giving Edward old turns of speech. I appreciate the fact that she does do those small details and that she does take the time to include that in her writing. New tab, who dis? And orange was the colour where I said I don't know what I'm going to tab, but starting to read this I suddenly remembered that this is the book where Edward is the most overprotective and the most problematic that he is across the whole series, so I decided to tab every moment that he's problematic, and we've had quite a few so far. So far he's forbidden Bella from seeing Jacob, has actively stopped her from doing so by ruining her car to stop her from going where she wants to go. He also has lied about Alice's vision and just deceived her in terms of what the vision was about, and he's also done it in such a way that he's kind of gaslighting Bella's thoughts. Bella feels like she's being overdramatic. Bella feels like she's got a wild imagination because she imagines something far more dangerous and far worse than what Edward says the vision truly was about, but that is a lie, and the fact that he's gaslighting her like that is definitely problematic. And he also kind of manipulates this conversation between Bella and Charlie so that Bella herself will push wanting to go on holiday to see Renee, and I already remember that that's because there are vampires in a dangerous situation happening here in Forks. So the fact that he does all of those things is definitely problematic and is definitely not the Edward I like to see. I can't believe younger me was behind all of that, but then again, younger me was a naive teenager who didn't really know that much about relationships. Then we have such a cute Charlie parenting moment. Maybe I should be marking cute Charlie parenting moments. Used all my colours. So I did say that pink is going to be moments where I think, like, I love this couple, they're actually doing some romantic and cute, but from what I can remember I don't think there's too many romantic and cute moments, so I'm going to switch up pink and tab when Charlie is being a good parent. But Charlie does something really good in this one. Tries and has a sex talk with Bella, and I just approve of the fact that he does try. As a single dad, those conversations must be hard for some single dads to have with their daughters, but I appreciate the fact that he did try his very, very best. I do like the found family moments in this series. I talked about that a bit with my Breaking Dawn Read It Backwards video, and in this one we only have like one paragraph and we're not even there in person, but she mentions that Edward and Alice play chess and it's just kind of a game within their minds because of the power that they have, and it just sounded like so sweet. We still haven't seen Jacob, and I still don't know exactly where Jacob and Bella left off. She mentioned that they had a conversation in New Moon at the end in the forest, and I have no idea what that conversation was or what it was composed of or what they decided on or didn't decide on. Read It Backwards is hard because I want to know those things, but I'm not supposed to go into New Moon and just check. So Bella goes to Renee with Edward and they have a bit of a conversation, and Renee talks about feeling concerned about how protective Edward is of Bella and the fact that Bella moves around him like a satellite. And Bella immediately gaslights Renee and saying like, oh, you're imagining things, you've been reading too much sci-fi novels, and it's just like, wow, Bella, you've really learned a thing or two from Edward, haven't you? At one point, Jacob shows up at the school and him and Edward have this conversation, and Edward says, do you really think hurting her is better than protecting her? And I think that just shows the whole dynamic and the difference between Edward and Jacob, and why Jacob is actually healthier for Bella in some ways, and that is because Jacob is willing to tell Bella the truth. Edward is not willing to do so, and I think that's one of the problematic things about Edward. If you love someone, you're just going to be upfront with them. You need communication, and Edward is not about that communication, and that's definitely a big problem in their relationship. At one point as well, they're in school and they're passing notes back and forth while they're discussing, and it made me realise how much that I forget that this book is actually takes quite a bit of place like in school, where they're in class and talking about these like vampiric things while also trying to go through lessons. That's a big thing, especially in the first book, and I forgot that it even features in Eclipse. It's just when we get to Breaking Dawn that this book is set outside of school. Then there was also a scene where Bella's human friends have seen Jacob and they have the discussion where they're betting on whether Edward's going to win Bella or Jacob's going to win Bella, and I just find that so hilarious because it's literally the book itself doing this whole Team Jacob or Team Edward thing, which is literally what we were all doing that time when these books were coming out, and arguably are still doing now, talking about which team we were. We're getting to see some of the camaraderie between Bella's friends, because in the last book you really have no sense that she was close to any of her friends. There's even this scene where she goes to like Angela's house and Angela's talking to her boyfriend Ben, and it's just like, wow, you completely forget that Bella actually had friends. At one point she even goes to work, and I was like, Bella had a job? We forget that she did these things that were outside of Edward. At one point Bella's talking about wanting to become a vampire, and Edward says, you know, you can marry me under my conditions, but if you don't want to marry me and then become a vampire, that's between you and Carlisle. And I was like, between Bella and Carlisle? I totally forgot that her and Carlisle have some kind of agreement going on. There's also a throwaway thought where Bella arranges some magnets in a straight line, and then she's like, maybe I have OCD. Bella, no. So at one point in this, Bella manages to sneak off to the reservation to see Jacob, and it made me so happy. Like, when her and Jacob reunite, they're like little kids who have seen each other for the first time in a long time, and that just shows how pure and enjoyable their friendship is, and I love that their friendship is like that. I wish that we had more moments where we got to see their friendship just being all happy and funny and dandy, rather than this huge love triangle that kind of corrupts everything. Jacob has a very interesting conversation when he's talking about reasons why Bella should not date Edward. Jacob says that Bella should date within her species, and then he also goes on to say that the vampire shouldn't exist. Their existence goes against nature. And when I read that, I was immediately thinking about all of these like racist things that I read about when we talk about slavery and the history of slavery. Can we read Bella and Edward's relationship as a huge analogy for interracial relationships and how people are like, you should only date people of your own culture? I don't know. Could we read it that way? Maybe. I'm not going to take the time to think too much deeply into these things because I'm not here to analyze the whole series. Jacob mentions how he doesn't age, and then he's like, do I look 16 to you? And I was like, Jacob is supposed to be 16. I completely forgot that Jacob is 16 in these books, which is so young, which makes a bit more sense for a lot of the immature behavior that he does in this book in particular. I know that he's quite a bit more grown up in the next one, and it's so easy to forget that these characters are like 16 and 17. Like, Edward's a vampire, so okay, he's 17, but he's not 17. But Bella is 17 and Jacob is 16. And also they talk about imprinting, and Jacob goes into the backstory of Sam, and I completely forgot that Emily, who Sam is with, is actually Leah's cousin. That makes Leah's story so much more sad. Like in Breaking Dawn, I was talking about how Leah's story is sad. It just drove home how much more painful that must be. When Edward goes off to hunt, now that Bella snuck away once, Alice is left to babysit, and Bella actually says, Alice, isn't this behaviour a little bit controlling? Isn't this a little bit psychotic perhaps? And Alice is like, I don't really think so. And I'm just like, wow, Bella's finally realising that Edward is overprotective, and Alice is the one who's just like, not really. Alice, you need to know better. So we just had Rosalie's backstory, and I felt a lot of things about this backstory because I think younger me didn't quite compute the relevance and the darkness of what is actually being talked about. So I'm going to be discussing sexual assault briefly here, and I'll have an emoji up here and I'll let that image go down once I'm done talking about the sexual assault. But I think we forget that she was essentially gang raped because Stephenie Meyer jumps over it. She leads up to it so we know what's happening, and then she just cuts off that bit, and Rosalie says, I don't want to, I'll just spare you the details, and then she moves on. And it's actually quite a heavy thing to just have in the middle of this book. Not that we shouldn't have heavy things in this book, but I think it's quite often forgotten and overlooked about Rosalie's story. And I quite like the way that Rosalie got revenge. I think I know what her story is, but I forgot it. I forgot how well her reasons set her up for what happens in Breaking Dawn and why she's so protective of Bella, especially when she talks about wanting a child. Bella takes something away from the story that is completely different than Rosalie's aim, which just, it like completely misses the mark with Bella. Rosalie's actually doing a really good thing. She's making Bella think about things that she hasn't thought about before, because until Breaking Dawn, when she has that dream, she doesn't think about having children at all. She's only thinking about the age side of things. So Rosalie's kind of trying to point her in the right direction, and Bella doesn't even think about it. Even if Bella just thought about it and said, oh, I don't want to have children, that's perfectly fine, because if she makes that decision, that's her decision. But she doesn't take a chance to think about that at all after the discussion, so I think she completely misses the point. I also remember on Twitter somewhere, you know, deep in the Twilight fandom, because I go deep, Bella mentions that Edward doesn't like to tell other people's stories because he hears so much more than they want to tell. And it reminds me that I forget to give Edward credit, because he does a pretty good job. His power is one that could so easily take advantage of other people with, but he doesn't use it to take advantage of other people. I know there's a backstory moment where he talks about killing people and how he used the mind reading thing, but excluding that, he doesn't use it to take advantage of people, and I appreciate that. Rosalie mentioned how she found Emmett and how she saved him and converted him, and it made me just have a moment where I was like, Emmett just doesn't even get to tell his own backstory. I feel like everybody tells their own backstory except for Esme and Emmett, and that's just so fitting for their characters, because those are two characters who are really underutilized in the Cullen family, and you just don't really get to see that much of them. There was one moment in these 200 pages where Esme said something and I was like, whoa. Esme speaking, because she and Emmett really don't do much other than be the typecast roles of a motherly character and somebody who's strong and just wants to like mess around all the time. I also really want to know, what was Emmett doing to get himself mauled by a bear? Was he hiking? Did he provoke the bear? I feel like Emmett totally would have provoked the bear. At one point Bella goes to school and it's literally just a small scene, and Mike is like, where's Edward? Not here. Do you want to hang out tonight, Bella? So I don't know if this is Mike just being a friend and saying like, wow, Bella's finally not with her other half, we can have time to spend together as friends. But in the writing also mentions that Mike sounds so hopeful, and I don't know if it's like hopeful as friends or hopeful as, can I move in on Bella? And it just reminded me all of a sudden that Mike is so annoying in the first two books. I could be wrong, I need to wait till I read them backwards again, but I remember Mike just always being persistent about chasing down Bella, even though Bella's made it clear that her preference is not for him. And that leads me on to my next question. Why are Bella and Jacob always holding hands? What is Bella doing? Bella knows that Jacob has feelings for her. Bella knows that she's never going to return those feelings. So yes, I completely think there's nothing wrong with a boy and girl holding hands while they are friends. Do what you want. However, it's not a platonic friendship right now. There's one person who has feelings for the other person, and you just need to do things to help them get through removing those feelings, so then you can go back to being friends. Holding hands at the moment, it's not going to help him, Bella. So Bella and Jacob have an argument, and then Bella goes back to Alice, and Alice is the one who's like looking after her while Edward's gone. And then Alice sees that Bella's upset and asks like, do you want to talk about it? And again, it just struck me for a second. Alice and Bella are really good friends. I feel like I always forget that they're friends because we are told that they are friends, but we don't see that many scenes with them being friends as far as I can remember for me to think, oh yeah, Bella and Alice, they're a really strong female friendship. Like, I never think of them when I consider female friendships, and that's because Bella's always just like being pampered by Alice and maybe complaining a little bit, and I forget, you know, they actually have a bond. And that moment reminded me, yeah, Alice and Bella are friends, even though Alice knows asking Bella what's wrong opens up a whole bag of tricks for her because there's Edward and she's trying to be objective and she still wants to be a good friend to Bella regardless of her own prejudices. That's all good stuff. Okay, Edward comes back from his trip and he's all of a sudden like, sorry Bella, I was wrong. I shouldn't have been so overprotective. If you want to see Jacob, you can. If you think the werewolves are safe, I'll trust your judgment. And I'm just like, forget Midnight Sun. I don't want to know what Edward was thinking during Twilight. I want to know what Edward was thinking during Eclipse. What happened on that hunting trip that he just came back as this totally reasonable and less toxic boyfriend ready to actually listen to his girlfriend? How did that happen? Was he just hangry? Was that hangriness? We also have a little phone call between Edward and Jacob, and we start to see the beginning of the werewolves and the vampires working together. I have to say, some of my favourite moments are when the werewolves and the vampires are working together. I think that's the thing I like the most. I don't think I love the enemies to lovers trope as much as I think I do, because none of my ships are enemies to lovers. But I like the enemies to, as I've put it before, enemies to co-workers. I really love seeing that. So every time the vampires and the werewolves start to work together, I'm just like... Jacob explains to Bella why he's always running around shirtless, and I don't know, do I miss the days when young adult authors tried to get their like guy characters shirtless as much as possible because readers loved it? Do I miss those days? It was just funny because I remember all of the books with like randomly running around shirtless teenagers. So dramatic. Old Young Adult is just such a laugh. And at that moment when she's cleaning away the blood and everything, Jacob asks if she has OCD, and I'm just like, can we stop? Also, at one point when Jacob invites Bella out and Bella's like, oh, I don't know if I can come because maybe my boyfriend doesn't want it. Jacob's like, I watched this TV series the other day about controlling abusive teenage relationships. And I was like, yes, Jacob, yes. Get Bella to watch that TV show. She needs to learn a thing or two. And then Edward comes in and Edward's like, don't you need to ask me if you can go to this werewolf party thing later? And Bella's like, oh, I wasn't going to ask you. And then she has this whole scene where she's trying to figure out what Edward wants, and she's trying to fight the yearning to go to the werewolf party because she knows that Edward probably doesn't want her to go, but he's just being nice, and she doesn't know what Edward really wants. And she's just, how deeply did Edward manipulate her, even that she wants to go and she really wants to be there, but because she knows that before he didn't want her to, she's trying not to want to go because she knows what his reaction used to have been. That's some deep manipulation. That's some deep toxic relationship facts right there. When I was first reading this, but I think when I was first rereading this, I was thinking about how dumb the characters in this book are, because first Victoria visits, then there's this army of vampires, and then a mysterious visitor comes in to smell Bella's clothes and like take Bella's clothes and her scent. Why, like, these vampires are centuries old. Why did none of them take a moment to think maybe these three random threatening things that are happening are not disjointed and may be connected? If they used like 2 of their brain cells that they must have grown in the centuries that they've been alive, they would have figured it out. But no, smart vampires can't figure these things out. We have to wait until our main character Bella puts 2 and 2 together. And last but not least, we need to talk about the ridiculousness of the last scene that I read just by the chapter where I stopped reading, is the scene where Edward goes to the line to drop off Bella so that she can go hang with Jacob, and Edward like snogs Bella and then hands over Bella to Jacob, and then Jacob hugs Bella, and they're just doing it to mess with each other. And I'm just like, you guys are both 5 years old and you don't get to have nice things because you're both ridiculous and just playing up the love triangle to the absolute max. I'm not sure how the lighting is going to handle this. So let's start with some things that I don't think Meyer does very well. So whenever she refers to Emily, who is Sam's wife's face, she often uses the word ruined because Emily's got a lot of scars. And when we get later on Jasper's reveal of his backstory, he also has scars up on his arms, and she uses the word ravaged, and I'm not a big fan of her terms when describing these people who have scars. I think she could use better terminology. Again, another thing that I wasn't a huge fan of is in this one we get some of the legends and the stories that relate to the werewolves, and she starts to talk about like spirit warriors and like leaving your body and all of that, and I just it's not her place to talk about that. It did not make me very comfortable and I didn't like that at all. Then I recently talked about how I don't see Alice and Bella's friendship, and then after that a whole flurry of scenes happened which shows me Bella and Alice's friendship, even times where Bella trusts Alice before she trusts Edward, or trusts her more because she's a friend rather than a partner, just different kinds of trust for different things. And I did appreciate seeing that, so I was definitely proven wrong. Alice and Bella do have a strong friendship and it is featured. I just wasn't looking at it, probably because I was looking at Jasper. At one point in this, Bella literally says, I'd rather not be human, I'd rather not be waiting around all helpless and delicious, and I just cracked up so much at that wording. Sometimes this book is just too funny. I also quite like the scene when we have Bella panicking because Carlisle, I now know that Carlisle had a deal that he would transform her after graduation, and she's panicking because graduation's coming up and she's not ready yet, and I quite like seeing that panic. I don't think she's ready as of where she is in this book, and I think it's a good idea that they decided to delay it. And Edward actually says some pretty good stuff about waiting until your hand is not being forced and it's truly your choice. And saying that, Edward then talks to Bella about why she doesn't want to marry him, and Edward's like, tell me honestly why you don't want to marry me. And he mentions that he had this insecurity that Bella was craving immortality more than craving a life with him, and that was just, you know, there's not been many moments in this read it backwards yet where I've been like, Edward's doing something cute and romantic. Just I haven't been feeling it in Breaking Dawn, and I just only felt it just then when we got to see an insecurity of Edward's, and I don't think up until now we've seen any of Edward's insecurities. So it was nice to kind of have that moment where we see, oh, he's not as perfect as we think, he makes misunderstandings, and well, we knew he's not perfect because he's like a creepy stalker, but a normal human insecurity in terms of loving Bella and not feeling enough. And I also had this groundbreaking moment when I finally understood that Rosalie, in her relationship with Emmett, is actually the more defensive and protective person, and that their dynamic has entirely shifted. They're discussing about the coven of vampires who are in Seattle killing people, and Emmett's like, let's go now, and Rosalie is upstairs and she hisses like, we ain't going nowhere. And I just remembered in the beginning of the book when Victoria visits, she's hopping between the boundary between wolves and Cullens, Emmett jumps over into the wolves territory and then gets back, but then Rosalie also jumps over to defend him and to like protect him. And oftentimes we see like Jasper wanting to be protective of Alice and Edward wanting to be protective of Bella, and we do see even Carlisle being protective of Esme, but I'm just realizing how much in like subliminal ways we see Rosalie is the more protective one of Emmett. And it also kind of makes sense with Rosalie's backstory of her having saved Emmett from the bear. She's the one who's the most protective in this relationship that she's got going on, and I don't know why I'm suddenly so interested in Rosalie when I'm reading Eclipse at the moment. I think maybe it's because I actually took the time to think about her backstory more, but I like Rosalie. Rosalie is like fixing the car while Emmett is acting as a jack for her and holding it up, and I'm just like, Rosalie fixes cars and she's beautiful. Like, Rosalie is amazing. And then we have to talk about Jasper's backstory. I forgot actually that this book is quite slow paced because I've read more than half of the book and no action has happened. And it's a lot more slow paced than the other ones because we're getting so many more characters' backstories. But Jasper's backstory, we get to hear about my favourite little cowboy bodyguard. He's so adorable. I just love Jasper so much. Honestly, I've been campaigning that Jasper is an INFJ. Actually, the reason Jasper becomes a vampire is because he stops and helps the wrong people. That's like immediate INFJ behaviour. And in Jasper's story, we actually see the Volturi as good because they do have a purpose, and I think it's just a nice switch up because all the bad stuff we've seen about the Volturi, we're like, why on earth are they even established? Why on earth do people listen to them? But he talks about the good stuff that the Volturi do, and it's also important to see that, even though, of course, the Volturi are still problematic, major problematic and evil, and still exist by the end of the series. There's like no solving of that issue. It's good to know that there is good in them as well. I literally had a moment where I was like, oh, that's who Peter and Charlotte are. We meet so many secondary characters in the final book, and I was like, Peter and Charlotte? Okay, they've got history, okay. But now that we've had Jasper's backstory, we know who... I just said Jasper. But now that we've had Jasper's backstory, we know who Peter and Charlotte are. And also Jasper mentioning how hunting is emotional turmoil for him. I never even thought about that side of things, about how he feels the emotion of the prey, and I just feel for him so much. He must have really struggled. And of course, Jasper's sad story ends with him meeting Alice, and that scene right there where Jasper explains Alice's meet cute and then they kind of do the same actions in real life, that is the cutest romantic scene in all of Eclipse. Fight me. It's the cutest one. Alice and Jasper have the cutest meet cute. Oh, I also had another big moment. See, this is what I expected from reading backwards, is that in this one it explains that Irina has a problem with the wolves because Irina had a thing with Laurent. Laurent is killed in New Moon, and I remember that, by the wolves when they're protecting Bella, which is why Irina doesn't like the wolves, and Irina's dislike for the wolves is what contributes to her running straight to the Volturi in Breaking Dawn to snitch. I completely forgot that tiny scene where we see why she hates the wolves, and then when I read it I was like, things in Breaking Dawn make sense, because when they said Irina doesn't like the wolves, I kind of just skimmed over it, like I accepted it, but I didn't take it in because I didn't remember why, and now everything makes sense. Okay, now we're getting into some tea. Jacob tells Bella, I love you, and you know, we all saw that coming, we don't mind, we know this is a love triangle, but the next thing he does is the most problematic thing, and it's the part where I dislike Jacob the absolute most, is that he kisses Bella without Bella's permission. And it's just horrific. That scene is horrific. He kisses Bella without her permission, and then Bella's literally fighting him back, and he acknowledges that Bella is fighting him back, and then he kisses her harder because he acknowledges that she's fighting back. That is so problematic. You know what? I felt her frustration when she tried to punch Jacob in the face and it had no effect, but it broke her hand. my blood was boiling. There was something else that made me angrier, and I'm just so upset that Stephenie Meyer just did this to Charlie, is that Charlie is supportive of Jacob. Bella goes home, she goes to Charlie and she explains the situation, and Charlie says, "Good for you, kid," to Jacob. Like, Charlie, can you not? Can you just not? And then later on, after the whole graduation scene, Charlie's like, you know what, you need to know how to defend yourself when someone you don't like kisses you. It's important that you can defend yourself in those situations. And I was like, good, this is good parenting. You want your child to be able to defend themselves against any sexual assault situations. That's good. And then he was like, and you need it just in case Jacob does it again, because he's going to do it again, because he's a kid. And I'm like, no, Charlie, no, that's not right. You need to be berating Jacob for this. You need to be talking to Jacob for this. You can't just go around kissing girls against their will because he wants to. No, that shouldn't happen. Charlie, I expected better from you. Jacob, I expected better from you too. That's all I have to say. And I have to say I'm impressed with Edward's conduct, because after this situation, Jacob and him have a little standoff. In the film, they make that standoff way more tense than it is in these books, but it's still equally as tense. And Edward's literally like, I'm not gonna kill you just because Bella would be upset later on. And I was just like, Edward, you've got more self-control than I ever expected. Honestly, I'm telling you, that time that he went away to hunt and then he came back, he is a changed person. I have to be honest, I don't like how easily Bella forgives Jacob. I think Jacob doesn't show enough remorse, and I do think that he could have done a bit more before Bella was just like, okay, I forgive you, let's move on. There was also a scene that I literally loved where Jacob is trying to figure out what's happening at this graduation party, and he intimidates Alice, and Alice is just like, excuse me, and then Jasper, he shows up, he's there in a blink of an eye, and he's just looking petrifying like, how dare you block the way of my girl? You better move. And I think I'm just remembering how much I love Jasper. I already knew I loved Jasper, but why is it that always in my favourite series I end up loving the secondary characters so much more than the main characters? Do I care about Edward and Bella? No. Do I want a Jasper and Alice story? Yes. In this book, Bella was like, oh, I'm scared to see the wolves. This is going to be the third time that I see Jacob in wolf form. And I was like, the third time you see Jacob in wolf form? Because in Breaking Dawn, she's always talking about Jacob in wolf form, and all of the wolves are just so normal and natural to her. And in my head, the book New Moon is just completely a werewolf book in my head. So I have this impression that the whole of New Moon, she spends time with them as wolves and humans, but I guess she mostly just spends time with them as humans. So therefore, this is actually only the third time she sees Jacob in wolf form, and it completely blew my mind. Then we get to one of my favourite scenes. Okay, so I don't know why I needed to grab my book, but my favourite scene in Eclipse, and one of my favourite scenes in the entire series, the fighting training scene where Jasper is teaching them how to kill newborn vampires, essentially. And I love this scene for many reasons. The first being, it's totally a Jasper spotlight. The only two Jasper spotlights we get in the whole series is when Jasper tells his backstory, and also when Jasper teaches them how to fight. I love Jasper, so of course Eclipse, like, of course it's one of my favourites. We get those two main Jasper scenes. Secondly, I think this is the first time that we get to see and truly value Edward and Alice's powers in a practical sense. In the other books, we get to see that Ara wants Edward and Alice, and in New Moon and Breaking Dawn, because they have such formidable powers. However, we see those powers as kind of all the mental advantages of having these powers and things. We never really get to see them used in a sense of how is this going to help them while they're fighting? How is this going to help them defend themselves? And we get to see that in the fighting scene, and the fighting scene with Alice and Jasper, and the fighting scene with Edward and Jasper is just absolutely perfect. I also really like how the films did these two scenes. The films adapted them really well, and when Alice fights Jasper at the end, she like kisses him on the throat, and it's all cute, and they have a little moment, and I'm just like, Alice and Jasper truly have the best romance. Then we have a moment where Jacob and Bella are just chatting while Jacob's in wolf form and Bella's in human form, and I actually really like that. Jacob and Bella's friendship is so pure when Jacob is as a wolf, again because it's just the friendship and it's not in any way romantic, and that's why I like those scenes so much. And the last thing I want to say, I stand corrected, Jasper's not an INFJ. He is, in my opinion, an INFP, and an INFP and an INFJ are very easy to get confused because they have a lot of similarities. The biggest difference that I can always see is the practicality of a person. INFPs are a lot more practical, or at least come across as a lot more practical, and I think in this part where we get to see the Cullen strategizing, and also Jasper training them and the thoughts that he has. Like, he has some errant thoughts and Edward's like, not a chance, that puts Bella in danger. And in that moment I was like, oh, Jasper's actually an INFP because he's thinking practically, and bodyguards tend to be P of the J or P side of things just because they're always thinking practically, and that makes them a good bodyguard, which makes a lot of sense because all of my favourite male characters tend to be INFPs. Adam Parrish is an INFP. Adilio from the Gone series, from what I remember, is likely an INFP, and then we have Jasper, who's probably an INFP. So Edward was talking to Bella, and Edward said, "The way you regard me is ludicrous," and I'm just saying Edward said it. And then Bella plays the manipulation game for the first time. She's learned so well from her partner in crime. She has manipulated him into choosing whether he sits out with her or goes and fights with his family. Now, honestly, personally, I can't help but think how terrible of her to make him choose between her or her family. I do think there are some situations in life which do warrant a choice between having a happily ever after with the love of your life or having to choose your family. Sometimes there are situations where you have to choose between the two. However, this situation did not call for it, and Bella made him choose, which I was just like, rude. You didn't need to make him choose. You didn't need to make him make that decision. He said it was going to be alright, and it is going to be alright. And I can't help but like side-eye Bella in this moment. Bella decides that next time there's going to be a fight or any type of confrontation, she is not going to be helpless, she's going to be a vampire, and as we've seen in Breaking Dawn, that's exactly the situation she's in the next time, which further proves my essay title of when Bella makes up a decision, she gets her way. And now we need to talk about the marriage sex situation. I thought we were done with that after Breaking Dawn, but no, we get it here too, because they bargain their way into marriage. Honestly, just leave it to this couple. Edward and Bella have been bargaining since day one, since book one. When Bella was trying to figure out if Edward was a vampire or not, she was saying like, you tell me some things and I'll tell you some things. The whole thing where Bella's trying to seduce Edward, it reeks of awkwardness. I was just reading and I was cringing for Bella, but literally Edward makes some really, really good points when he's refusing her. I know they don't consider the pregnancy side effect that happens, but just imagine, take one moment to imagine if Edward killed Bella during sex. He would be livid. He'd be so sad. I can't imagine how soft and gentle he has to be with Bella every single day of their relationship, not to kill her. So in situations where they go beyond that, it's just inevitable that he would kill her. I don't understand how he manages to do it without killing her. Don't think that's believable. Forget Midnight Sun. I want the Breaking Dawn scenes from Edward's perspective because he cannot have been enjoying himself in any way or form. The book makes it seem like he's enjoying himself, but literally every moment of their experience in their honeymoon, he must probably be thinking, I hope I'm not killing her, I need to be gentle. He can't be enjoying himself, he must be majorly distracted. I do have to admit that it's quite cute to see Edward so excited about the concept of marrying Bella. Bella is entirely reluctant, she does not want this, she's not happy to be in this situation. But Edward is just glowing and in love and happy, and it's kind of adorable. Eclipse is really making Edward seem human. We're seeing him be jealous, we're seeing him be in love, we're seeing him be doubtful and insecure every now and again, and we rarely get to see that. Bella cuts herself while she's creating the trail in the woods, and Edward's like, it's okay, this doesn't faze me anymore, it doesn't bother me anymore. And I'm just saying, how much must it take for him to get over this? I know I talked about this in my Breaking Dawn video, but I want you to know that if the love of my life was made out of dried mango or lemon cheesecake, no matter how much time I've had with him, I would probably still end up eating him. And at one point, Bella's talking to Jacob and she shouts out the fact that the kiss that Jacob gave her was not a kiss, it was an assault in her mind. And I was like, yes, Bella, you tell him it how it is. So I know that in the end, Jacob is correct that Bella is in love with both Edward and Jacob, but it still annoys me that the entirety of Jacob's argument about why he's still pursuing Bella is because of the fact that Bella doesn't know what she wants and that Bella doesn't know that she's in love with me, because I'm kind of done with the narrative of women not knowing what they want or women not knowing about themselves, and that basically men know the best for them. I'm kind of done with that argument. Now we have to talk about the tent scene. The tent scene is a major scene, okay? It changed the game for a lot of love triangles. The peak of love triangle. There's love triangle and then there's the 10th scene. It's the peak of love triangles. I just have to take a moment to admire Edward for his self-control, because he's literally got another man pressed up against his girl and he can read Jacob's thoughts. He can see all of the thoughts that Jacob is thinking. That must be difficult. I just have to give it to Edward. At one point, Jacob mentions that he has chin-length hair. Chin-length hair. I think because the films kind of overpower my memory for this, because in the films he chops his long hair and then he's always got short hair. I forget that he grows it out again in Eclipse because he thinks that Bella likes him better with long hair. Completely forgot about that. And then in the 10th scene, we have Edward talking to Jacob and admitting that he is super jealous of Jacob and he's got those jealousy feels. And it's just another thing that makes him so human. I think that's why I like Eclipse second best in the series, because of the fact that we get to see Edward as so human. And Edward also makes a good point where he mentions how many times he's thought that Bella is either dead or dying in this series, and it doesn't even end, because in Breaking Dawn we know that she's like literally dying all over again. So it just makes me think he has been through an emotional roller coaster within him getting to know Bella. The Cullens have had so many ups and downs and excitements and adventures with Bella in their life, and Edward must have had some emotional turmoil. Is that Breaking Dawn foreshadowing, or is it just a case in point with Bella always almost being on the edge of death? Who even knows? And I'm telling you, Edward being sassy Edward is the best kind of Edward. He's throwing barbs at Jacob, Jacob's throwing them back, and they're just acting kind of brotherly. And we get to see that brotherly relationship more in Breaking Dawn. The way that Edward wakes up Jacob by like ripping open the sleeping bag and chucking him across the tent. How big is this tent for starters, but also how dramatic are they? I'm telling you, someone must have upped Edward's venom dosage during the night, because Edward is major dramatic the next morning. So Edward does a thing to make Jacob know that Bella's engaged, and I kind of agree with Edward at this point. He deserves to know that Bella is engaged and that she's off the table. Well, not technically, because she can still change her mind, but definitely Jacob deserved to know. Jacob's second kiss with Bella is absolutely awful. It took some manipulation, and it feels so uncomfortable to see the blatant manipulation happen, and for Bella to just give into it. And in the beginning, in the kiss, she's like so stiff and not feeling it. It's painful to read. I know she changes her mind halfway through the kiss and she starts to like feel it and stuff, but everything that leads up to it is literally so wrong and so uncomfortable that, again, I really don't like Jacob in this book. I think Eclipse is the book where Jacob is the literal worst. Again, I'm just propping up Edward a lot here. I know in the beginning of the book I tore him down so much because of the manipulation, everything problematic he did. But in Eclipse, Edward kind of flips and he kind of becomes the best option for Bella. And that way he handles this whole thing with Jacob and everything that happens after the kiss scene, and seeing it himself through the minds of the pack, and then seeing Bella and how he reacts to Bella and being kind to Bella. I can just imagine the emotional torment and turmoil that he's going through, the doubt, the jealousy, and yet he's still putting on his best face for Bella, and he offers Bella the Polly situation on a silver platter. He literally says, like, you can have as much of me or as little of me as you want. I'm not going to make you choose between us. And Jacob would have ever agreed to it. Bella could have had it both ways, and knowing Edward and Jacob, things could have happened. I'm just gonna leave that there. I just feel like Edward is so understanding in this, inhumanly understanding, maybe a bit too perfectly understanding, but you can see that that understanding is costing him, so maybe it is human after all. In this one also, Bella takes the time to vow that she's never ever gonna hurt Edward in that way ever again, and then Breaking Dawn happens, and I can see why it foreshadows why Bella is so chipper and putting on her best face throughout the painful pregnancy, because she doesn't want to hurt Edward in the way that she did in Eclipse. So that makes a lot of sense. And I remember mentioning in Breaking Dawn video, like, oh, Edward calls Bella love. When did that happen? I can see when it happened in Eclipse now, because after the Jacob kiss, when he's reassuring Bella that everything's okay, he still loves her regardless, he starts to call Bella love. And now we're at the part where the action is happening in the meadow, and Edward is just reciting it because he's reading it from Steph's mind and he's not actually there. The films make Eclipse seem way more action heavy than the book is, and I'm on page 470 of 550, and now the action is starting and we're not even there for the action. We're getting it recited to us. I know we're going to see a little bit of action when Victoria comes our way in Eclipse, but still the film does do the action better. It makes the action more central to the whole storyline, and we actually get to see the action happening in the meadow as well as what happens with the Victoria. So it's true that the film does make the action more central and more interesting, but I guess with these books, they're just so introspective and all about emotions and feelings. It's primarily a romance and not an action book. So I don't actually have anything to say about this fight between Riley and Veronica. Oh my gosh, I just read the book. And Victoria and them lot. I just don't have anything to say about the fight. Nothing significant happens. I do have to say about the aftermath. There's a really cute scene, which is not supposed to be cute, where this is the first time Bella's seen Edward murder anyone. So when Edward is done fighting, he's worried that he's scared Bella off. And it just threw me back to the first book in the series, Twilight, where Edward mentions always waiting for Bella to do the running and the screaming and disappear into the nothingness because she's so afraid of him. And he's just flashed back to that moment where he's shown another layer of his strength and his ability that Bella's never seen before, so he's waiting for the running and the screaming, which would hurt so much more if it happened in this book rather than in the first book. Also, when they get to the clearing and Jacob's been injured and everything, Carlisle volunteers like, nobody asked Carlisle to say anything, okay? And Carlisle's just like, I examined Jacob myself. And we all know that the crush starts there. There's something that happens, so in my Jarlath ship, which is what it's decidedly been called, Jarlath, there's something that makes Carlisle and Jacob, you know, start to have those feelings, and that moment is definitely when Carlisle is repeatedly looking after Jacob and repeatedly in his presence. So even though Carlisle doesn't know that his crush has started, it has started at that point. And then he goes on to like monologue about Jacob and how he's gonna be fine, and I'm just like, yeah, your crush. It's beginning. He even says like, as soon as this is over, I'm gonna go right back to Jacob, and I'm like, yeah boy, you run back to your crush. In the fight, we have another cute Jasper and Alice scene where Jasper was trying to be everywhere at once, especially making sure that Alice had nothing to do. Alice is like a foolish, overprotective boy, and I'm like, yeah, we love a foolish, overprotective boy trying to do the most. And again, it's such INFP behavior to try and protect everyone possible that he can all at once, even though he shouldn't do that. Then the whole scene with Bree happens, and I don't really have much to say about Bree Tanner. I'm not a big fan of that novella, and I'm not reading it for read it backwards, but just imagine, take a moment to imagine what life would have been like if Bree Tanner had joined the Cullens. It probably would have set back Bella's own conversion quite a bit, and they probably would have had to move for the safety of everyone, so that would have been interesting. So Bella goes back home, and Charlie's like, yeah, when Edward was with Carlisle healing Jacob, Edward was so concerned about Jacob, it was almost like it was his brother on the table getting fixed. And I was just like, Edward is concerned about Jacob, genuinely concerned. Is it because Edward's concerned for Jacob because Bella is always concerned about Jacob, or is it because Edward is actually already liking Jacob as a brother and is concerned for him? I like to think it's the latter, which is probably the case. At one point, Jacob says the only reason why you chose Edward is because Edward is a better manipulator than me, and honestly, Jacob, you're not wrong. At one point, Bella jokes with Jacob while she's going through the process of breaking up with Jacob, even though they haven't actually been dating, and she says, probably when I'm a vampire, I'm going to be such a menace that the pack has to take me out. And Jacob says, I would never let them do that. And it's so funny because, is that foreshadowing? That's exactly what happens. Bella becomes a menace because she becomes pregnant with this unknown thing at the time that they are having these struggles, and Jacob's like, you can't kill Bella. So essentially foreshadowing. Edward keeps asking Bella, is she sure she made the right choice when she chose between him or Jacob? And the fact that he keeps checking in with her and is just so tormented by her torment, I fell in love with Edward a little bit again. He's just doing the most by the end of this book. And at one point he says, I can't stand for you to be miserable, maybe ... maybe ... holy relationship. He's offering it once again. Then Alice and Bella situation happens where Bella's like, okay Alice, you can run my wedding and everything. And again, it just shows how much Alice and Bella are actually friends. I love seeing proof of that. It really shines in this book. And then they go to the meadow, and honestly, I have this meadow scene memorized because for Team Me, this meadow scene, it was everything. I love the meadow. I love that Edward and Bella have this beautiful place that they go to, and it's just iconic for them. I love that so much. The scene where Edward's like in the meadow with her and he's like, deals off, we're gonna do things your way, always gets me. I have that completely memorized. Edward has this epiphany that trying to do things his way has never worked. He's the one who forces the decision in New Moon. He's the one who left her. He's the one who tries to make decisions that essentially cause her a lot of pain. So it's kind of fair that he has this epiphany that doing things Bella's way might be better for the both of them. Where Edward says, "I love you, I want you right now." And when I was younger, before I discovered the genre of new adult, teen me, that scene did it for me. It really did it for me. And I'm not gonna lie, it still kind of does. It's a very innocent scene, and yet every time I read it I'm like, actually I get why I was in love with Edward. It makes perfect sense. And as for that epilogue, we got to see the real reason why Jacob is missing in Breaking Dawn. I did miss that information. I knew that Jacob was missing in Breaking Dawn. I knew it had something to do with Edward choosing Bella, but I didn't know that the catalyst for his disappearance was the fact that he received a wedding invitation. And it makes a lot of sense that Embry and Quill tried to follow him, and then Sam was like, give him some space. So that's all I have to say about Eclipse. If I had to rate Eclipse today, I'd probably rate it 4 stars. For me, I definitely believe that a 4-star rating can still be a favourite book, and this is still the my second favourite in the series completely. I still love it just as much. There were some points where things were iffy, some things I didn't like, and I don't particularly like the Jacob side of the triangle in this one. I should just say I don't like the way that the Indigenous characters are portrayed in this book, so I'm going to still have that link where you can donate to the tribe itself in the description box down below, and I'm also going to leave a link to some Indigenous Booktubers specifically, because that's what we do here. And yeah, that's all I can say. This video is definitely long. I don't think I can cut it down as much as I would like. So if you managed to make it this far into the video, please leave in the description box below the word triangle or a triangle emoji, whether you're on laptop or phone. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think about some of my thoughts? Do you agree? Disagree? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss a video of mine and you don't miss my next Read It Backwards. You know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior. Talk about the fact that this is not comfortable. Okay, we're gonna change up this angle. Forget to give Edward credit. I forget to give Edward Is it because he's concerned for Bella, or is it because... Mummy, what did you say? Tell that to Simone.